Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. This is the latest video in my series on the relationship between Greek and non-Greek states, which is part of the Greece unit for OCR A-Level Ancient History. And in this particular video, I'm looking at part of the Peloponnesian War between 419 and 413, which includes the Battle of Mantinea, and also, most importantly, the Sicilian expedition, which is arguably one of the most significant events in the Peloponnesian War, and one of the kind of underlying causes for Athens' eventual defeat, because it uses so much of their resources and men. So this is what the OCR spec for A-Level Ancient History tells us we need to know on this particular aspect of this unit. So we're looking at the Peloponnesian War, we're looking at the breakdown of relations and the alliance between Athens, Argos and Mantinea and Elis. We're looking at the effects of the Battle of Mantinea in 418 and the consequences of the Sicilian expedition 415 to 413 BC for Athens and for Sparta. So remember, this is a breadth unit, so we don't necessarily have to go into absolute minutiae detail of what happens in every single battle and things like that, but we do need to look at some of the overarching themes such as war and arbitration, leadership, etc. So there's some really good stuff in here, and we will crack on through. So to start off with, we'll look at the breakdown of relations, the alliance of Athens, Argos, Mantinea and Elis. Well, Argos had been increasingly concerned about their own position, as the Boeotians seemed to have not signed a treaty, and they feared that they would be again at the mercy of Sparta. So the Argos wanted to sign a treaty with Boeotia. It's kind of to try and put themselves in a more secure position. Boeotians hadn't signed it. The Argives were worried that this meant that the Boeotians were about to go over to Sparta. Athens and Sparta had fallen out because Sparta was trying to negotiate with Boeotia about the control of Panactum. And this is a fort on the border of Attica, which I think the Spartans wanted to get hold of so that they could try and exchange that for Pylos and kind of go by, you've got a fort, well, we don't want you to have a fort, we've got a fort where you don't want us to have a fort, we'll give a pass if you give a pass, let's swap, and so on. And the Boeotians had kind of been used as a bit of a kind of a pawn, being negotiated with on this. So doing this negotiation with Boeotia without involving Athens is in breach of the Peace of Nicaea, so you can see why Athens would be annoyed at that. And there's Alcibiades, who, or Alcibiades as I often call him, I'm never quite sure on the pronunciation. He's a young, increasingly influential figure in Athens, and he's leading the anti-peace group. So he's picking up this kind of role that we see in Athenian leadership from the likes of Cleon, who are the kind of the pro-war, pro-Athenian aggression group. And he, because of family connections and roles, he's from a very kind of high-ranking aristocratic family, and because of roles that people like his father had had before, he felt that Sparta should negotiate through him. But instead they negotiated with Nicias and Lyches, and he then saw Argos as a better alternative to Sparta, and he seemingly doesn't trust Sparta at this point. He's a very important character, Alcibiades. He swaps sides all the time. Following his career is a really interesting way of kind of studying this particular part of the topic. So at this point in Thucydides' book 5.43, he kind of is leaning towards Argos. He doesn't trust Sparta. We'll see him later on working with the Spartans. So it does get a little bit confusing. He's a key leader to keep your eye on. So he wants to move towards Argos. He argues that an alliance with Argos is the best option because of Sparta's action, and they kind of join up. They bring Elis and Mantinea with them, and Argos readily took up the offer. And again, this is in Thucydides' book 5.43. So we've got this kind of development, and it's largely an anti-Spartan alliance essentially, and it puts this group in a very strong position. They're kind of starting to hem Sparta in the lower half of the Peloponnese. Now Nicias is very keen to ensure peace with Sparta remains. he kind of proposed postponing the alliance with Argos until a deputation of himself and other leading Athenians had spoken to Sparta. This kind of fails. They don't get anywhere with those negotiations. And essentially this means that the Peloponnesian is ringed with forts at Pylos and Cythera, and Sparta had hostile states to its north, particularly in the case of Argos. And so it looks at this point, in terms of the broader thing with the Peloponnesian War, although we're not at a moment of conflict in here, but through arbitration and peace negotiations, that Athens is getting the upper hand, and particularly gaining new and powerful allies which can help them stand against the Spartans. We then get the Battle of Mantinea, and this kind of really starts to unravel what I've just been suggesting and talking about. So there's the new alliance with Argos and Athens and the others is looking to isolate Corinth. So Corinth is strategically absolutely vital, because the Isthmus of Corinth connects the Peloponnesian land up with the rest of Greece, so kind of a very narrow bit of land. So Corinth is absolutely at the crossroads in between the two kind of major bits of Greece. And they're looking to isolate Corinth. Alcibiades brought in Patrae in north of Corinth over to their side. Argos attacked Epidaurus, which is south of Corinth, and so you can see they kind of pin Sparta in, and that's how they kind of pinstring Corinth. Sparta is looking at this, and is fearful of losing more cities in the Peloponnese. The idea of Argos and Athens together is really the absolute nightmare scenario for Sparta. And they sent a large army under King Aegeus, made up of Spartans and Boeotians and Megarians. Again, Megarians are kind of the other side of Corinth. And this army is then met by an army from Argos plus 1,000 Athenian hoplites, and the Mantineans, again, who one of the groups joined this alliance with Athens and Argos, and both armies are trying to get to Tegea, and there's kind of strategic positioning of that, and they want to hold that. There is a battle. Thucydides goes into details on this in Book 5, sections 63 to 74. Now, there's a bit where essentially they try and keep their army in line, but as they march, there's always, with hoplite armies, they shift slowly to one side and gaps appear. So King Aegeus is doing his best and giving as strong as orders he can to try and make sure these gaps are filled, but a gap appears. The Argives and the Mantineans kind of storm through the gap. However, the Spartans, the main part of their army, charge and defeat the main section of the Argive Athenian army, and then the left wing of the Spartan army puts the Mantineans to flight. Now, on the Argive Athenian Mantinean side, we're told that there's about 1,100 killed, according to Thucydides, compared to only 300 Spartans. Not the most insane kind of comparative figures that we're given, and this is really a hugely significant victory for Sparta, and this is kind of Sparta getting its kind of idea of its great military strength kind of back again, which is really important for it. So their dominance is really, Spartan dominance is really kind of damaged by what happens to Specteria and Pylos. And Mantinea kind of really goes, right, look, we are back. We are the dominant force when it comes to things like hoplite warfare. So a really big boost for Sparta, and then almost like the fear of Sparta, and that's really important because the anti-Spartan alliance then collapses. So in Argos, an oligarchic faction seized power and signed a fresh 50-year peace with Sparta, which means that Argos is now neutral. So that kind of nightmare scenario for Sparta of Argos and Athens together is very quickly removed following this battle. Mantinea can no longer remain allied with Athens without Argos' support in Peloponnese, so they kind of pull out. And so in 417, so just a year after the battle, Sparta had regained its previous allies, and Argos is neutral again. So we had the bit where things looked really bad for Sparta very briefly, and then through its military prowess, it is able to re-establish itself in a much more powerful position. Right, this is always, I think, one of the hardest bits to explain of this bit of Greek history. I'm still at a loss, really, of why on earth Athens goes and does this, and then why it goes so full in. There's real issues in leadership here for Athens with Alcibiades, also with Nicias. Stuff goes horribly, horribly wrong. There's some bits which you just look at and go, I just can't. I can't quite work out why they would do that. Now, Thucydides must think this is massively important. He dedicates 2 whole books to it, and we can tell even going back to book 2 that he knew this was going to be hugely significant. Now, one of the themes in Thucydides' writing, because it's already important for AO3 stuff, is that he kind of goes, right, Pericles is a great leader. Any other leaders that ignore his advice, one of the centerpieces of Pericles' advice and policy is we don't try and expand the empire. The empire, we've got this empire, we are exploiting it. We shouldn't try and make it bigger. At that point, we're going to overstretch ourselves. We're going to be really vulnerable. And in Book 2, Section 65, he explicitly tells us that the Sicilian expedition was a big mistake. So he doesn't do that very often. So that's an important bit. So it's not actually in the 2 books that are really dedicated to the Sicilian expedition. It's earlier, but it's worth bringing that in. And there's some really good AO3 in that. And you can get it almost partly by just talking about the fact he dedicates 2 whole books to it of just how important this is in Thucydides' view on why Athens ultimately is going to lose the Peloponnesian War. So a city-state in Sicily, Egesta, comes to Athens and asks for help, and they have lots of silver with them to go, look, we're really wealthy. Now, they're fighting Selinus, and Selinus is allied with the most powerful city-state in Sicily, Syracuse. So Egesta offered to pay for Athenian help, and they brought silver, but their claims of wealth are exaggerated, and we'll see later on they don't have the money to back up what they're asking for. So Athens voted to send 60 ships, and we have the tripartite of Alcibiades, Nicias, and Lamachus. Lamachus always reminds me of Lepidus a bit in this, that it's a tripartite or triumvirate, but really the other 2 are the most important. So Alcibiades and Nicias are the really big 2 on this. Of those 3, Nicias speaks out against the expedition. So we've got Book 6, Section 8, where we're told about this tripartite triumvirate being created, and then in 6.12 to 6.13 we're told of Nicias speaking out against the expedition. Now, the whole aim of what Athens is trying to do here is unclear. Is it just to help Egesta? There seems to be more in there that seems to suggest that some about it is re-establishing the state of Leotone. That's also under the attack of Syracuse, so there seems to be a kind of an idea there's going to be a broader fight against Sicily. And are they aiming to conquer the whole of Sicily? Well, in which case 60 ships doesn't seem like enough. Now, Thucydides does claim twice in his work that was ultimately their aim, was the conquest of the whole of Sicily. Now, Nicias has been attacking Alcibiades and the whole idea of the expedition, and he then sees it's not working, so he goes, well, I'll change tactic. And he kind of does that bit, well, what I'll do is I will ask for something so ridiculous that the Athenian people will turn around and go, no, we're not giving you that. So he goes and asks for so many ships and so many men and so much money, he goes, right, I'm going to take this to the most ridiculous extreme. The Athenian people will then see the error of their ways in thinking this is a good idea, and they'll go, right, we are not going to do that, and they'll pull out. This is a terrible, terrible miscalculation. So the Athenian people rose to the challenge. They said, right, yeah, no, we will spend all this money. If you look in Thucydides, book 6, point 24, you'll find all this stuff about all this money and stuff they're going to pump into it. So they funded 2 fleets, the first of 100 ships, the second of 60 ships, and then all the men and things to go with all of this. There's about 50,000 men who get sent to Sicily. There is an enormous outpouring of national pride in Athens. See again, see Thucydides, book 6.31. And what made this expedition so famous was not only its astonishing daring, brilliant, and the brilliant show that it made. It kind of goes on about how amazing all of this stuff was. And it almost like the Athenian people become competitive with each other. They see this as a sign of their national glory and their strength. So they push ahead, and it's not just kind of the money that's raised through taxation. There's individuals who are pouring loads and loads of money into this, and it all looks like a kind of this great national effort, but it's going to turn into a terrible national disaster. There seems to be a bad omen as the fleet was about to depart, as the statues of Hermes, the god of travel, positioned around the city were desecrated, which essentially involved people running around knocking the willies off the statues. There were accusations that Alcibiades was involved in some other sacrilegious acts. This is going to be important because he's going to be recalled. So remember, he's the guy who thinks it's all a really good idea. But ultimately, he will get called back. Egesta, it turns out when they get there, didn't have all the money it had promised. The Athenian generals, particularly Nicias and Alcibiades, clash over tactics. Lamachus uses a plan Alcibiades had put forward, and then it failed. Alcibiades is recalled to face these charges linked to sacrilege. Nicias, therefore, who was against the whole scheme and his weird way of trying to stop the scheme backfired, ends up as the senior commander on the scheme he didn't think was a good idea. This is not ideal. In 414 into 415 over the winter, Syracuse requested Peloponnesian help. Corinth was really keen to go. Alcibiades was in exile from Athens now. He'd been exiled because of the sacrilegious acts he was involved in, and he ended up in Sparta. And in Sparta, he was acting as an advisor, and he encouraged Sparta to act. So this is Alcibiades, who encouraged the Sicilian expedition, is now going to exploit it on behalf, or help Sparta exploit it to defeat Athens. So in Sparta, he attacks the idea of democracy. It's important to have a look at that. It's in Thucydides, book 6, section 89. And he claimed, Athens aimed to claim the whole of Sicily, the whole of Italy, and then Carthage, and then with all these massive resources would come back and smash the Peloponnese. So he really puts the kind of the Spartans in fear of what's going to happen next. And again, this is in Thucydides, book 6, sections 90 to 91. So Alcibiades really is a bit of a snake at this point, and he's turned on Athens. Now Sparta sent a general called Gylippus to oversee the defence of Syracuse. Athens had taken the heights of Epiole above the city, and Athens started building. I do find the description of this, if you go into loads of detail, is really odd. The whole thing with the siege here, because it's an odd siege where the Athenians are building a wall around Syracuse. Before the arrival of Gylippus, the Syracuse were contemplating surrender. Nicias had slowed his efforts, so rather than building his wall all the way round, he then started creating a double wall in one bit and leaving another bit clear. So his wall doesn't cut off the city completely. The Syracusans are building counter walls to try and stop his walls go across. So as his wall goes round, they kind of build one across from it to try and cut it. Oh, it's all very confusing stuff. So Gylippus attacks the Athenian walls, and there are failed attempts, and he takes the responsibility. But eventually they kind of break the Athenian siege. Nicias withdrew his men to the 3 forts on the headland of Planerium. There's a problem with that. These men have very limited access to drinking water there. He sends back to Athens calling for reinforcements. In 413, Gylippus and the Syracusans attack the Athenian fleet before these reinforcements could arrive. Again, a lot of the battles around this point are fairly inconclusive, but Gylippus managed to take hold of the 3 forts. There's then again a number of more inconclusive battles. The Mantinea comes over from Athens with a large force. Initially, looks like these fresh troops are going to make the difference and would retake the height in Epioli, and it doesn't quite work out that way. The Athenians are pushed back. We then get, again, it's almost like going back to Herodotus. There's an eclipse of the moon. Nicias then delays the withdrawal of his troops. So Mantinea has been saying, right, we must withdraw. Nicias has been reluctant. It looks like they are withdrawing, and then he goes to an eclipse of the moon. He goes, oh, soothsayers, what does this mean? It says, don't do anything for 27 days. This proves to be disastrous. The Syracusans then attack the Athenians by land and sea, taking the harbour and blocking its mouth. So the Athenians are now trapped. They try and break out by sea. Obviously, when the Athenians are famous for their naval power, but they fail to get out by sea. So this is in Thucydides, Book 7, Section 71. There then are essentially two divisions, one under the Mantineas, the other under Nicias, who try and break out by land. They stop to drink at a river crossing, as I've already mentioned. They've been deprived of drinking water, and they get slaughtered. There's bits in the description about how they are kind of still drinking from the water, even when it's full of the blood of their fallen comrades. Nicias and the Mantineas are captured. They surrender to Agyptus, and they are both executed. He wanted to take them back to Sparta, and 7,000 prisoners are taken out working in the quarries. And it's all an absolute disaster for Athens. All these men, all these ships and stuff they sent out, none essentially return. So the impact in Athens is huge. The people were angry with those who've spoken in favour of the expedition, but people were determined to fight on to keep their empire. So they don't give up at this point, but they're angry at the stuff that's happened, and they feel that they've been misled. This then leads into, as we go forward, in 411, there's an oligarchic coup which sets up a government ruled by 400 men. These are the aristocrats who are now bearing the brunt of the expense of rebuilding the fleet. There's a lot of them suggestion that they kind of held back from Athenian politics, whilst things have been going quite well when the empire had been building and things have been going generally in their favour, and this had been helping their wealth and their position. But now, with the disaster of Sicily, they felt the need to step in. This oligarchy is beset with infighting, and there's then a further naval defeat off Euboea, and the 400 are replaced by a much broader oligarchy made up of 5,000 men. This later again will collapse, and Athens will go back to democracy once the naval successes kind of come back. And we'll look at some of that stuff later on. But this kind of thing, if you want to emphasise the significance of the Sicilian expedition, the fact that it actually leads to a collapse of democracy in Athens, I think is the kind of the clearest thing that you can use that really strongly indicates that. Now, Sparta is emboldened by all of this. They believe that peace with Athens is impossible, but they can now conceive of defeating the Athenian navy, because they've actually defeated an Athenian navy with the help of Syracuse over in Sicily. They knew the Athenians have lost loads of men, loads of resources, which has caused them massive problems. They also have the advice of Alcibiades, and his next suggestion is building a fort in Attica at a place called Declea, and I will look at that in my next video. So Sparta's got a lot of good things going for it, and we've seen a really quite dramatic shift during this video. So at the beginning, we see the setting up of this Argos with Athens and Athens and Argos and others, and kind of Sparta being really kind of hemmed in and really on the back foot. And then we see following their victory at Mantinea, and then the disaster for Athens in Sicily, we see the tables really turned, where now it's Athens that's under significant pressure, and Sparta is quite buoyant again. So I hope that's been helpful for you. Again, I'm going to do another video and add it to this series, which will pick up the last bit of of the story going through to 404 and Athenians' final defeat, and I'll keep adding to my ancient history stuff to add on top of all the A-level history stuff that's on here and all the A-level politics stuff that's there as well. So hopefully lots of useful stuff for you. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Thank you very much for watching.